Okay, right, this one is going to be a very, very detailed one. So this is quite a few pages of writing here. Incredibly vivid dream, and as how it looked, striking. I've got some little pictures that I've drawn, which won't look great, but they'll kind of help illustrate what I'm trying to say. But yeah, let's get into this one. So this dream then, it starts completely normal dream, set with a little bit of back knowledge as to where I am, and I think why potentially also. So I was at um, a barn slash sort of like restaurant area, um, and this is somewhere I used to go as a kid. Been a couple of times, a few times as an adult, but it's kind of like a pub restaurant sort of thing. But in this part, um, we're leaving the car park. Car park was a lot bigger actually than it currently is. We were on our way basically back home to the family home, which, as far as a walk goes, probably somewhere between 5 to 10 minutes, something like that. It's not really too far. And we're walking across this little sort of stone pebbled sort of entrance really to this pub restaurant. Um, and yeah, just walking along there. Um, and yeah, and I think it was basically my family. So me, my wife, my children, and I think my mum and her partner as well. The setting age wise was that the girls were younger, so it's like it was set back to maybe when they were sort of 5 years old rather than my eldest, who's 15 at the moment. So it's like we went back maybe um, not quite 10 years, because I don't think my youngest was sort of toddling around. So I would have said, not 10 years ago. Not that it's overly relevant anyway. As we were leaving, as we were leaving, it started to really throw it down with rain. And we were talking about what to do. I proposed obviously running back to the car, and maybe meeting them at home and seeing if I could find some coats or something like that, to keep us dry. As we were still walking and talking, we noticed that there was these kids that were zooming around in toy cars. They were kind of like the battery. I don't know if you ever had these as kids or something like that, but the ones that are like a miniature version of a Porsche, or like a Mercedes 4x4 or something like that. It was that kind of thing. Those little ones like sort of like buzzing around everywhere that the cars have fun in. The kids have fun in. But it's like those kind of ones, except that they were a lot bigger. So they were bigger than those types where you kind of put more or less a toddler on, don't you? And they just zoom off. Very, very basic. It was about 1/3 to maybe 2/3 of the size of a standard car. So pretty big, really. And they're racing around this car park, bumping into paths, and also traveling obviously a lot faster than a standard children's one would be. Bigger, faster, but still driven by children. They're pretty dangerous, clearly, and we were having to try and avoid them because you've got kids zooming around. They're not particularly good at getting out of the way of adults and stuff like that. So we're having to move up onto paths and get out of the way, and they're bumping up and going all over this kind of area at the time. We noticed. So we noticed that the rain, started to calm down a little bit, and so the decision was made that was made to walk home rather than, as I said, me kind of running off and trying to get the car and get that all sorted. I don't know why actually I'd leave the car there and then walk back home and then presumably go back and then pick up the car again. That was a bit odd. I didn't really understand that, but anyway, as we're walking home, we're discussing organising activities. So I get little sort of sporting bits and pieces, and I remember these activities are actually organised by the church. So this was something where I remember one of our pastors was talking in front of people earlier in the dream. So it's slightly out of sequence, but they were talking in front of all the congregation, let's say. So so mainly those that were in the venue, maybe they were church family, possibly at this restaurant kind of place that we just come from. Not really sure. But we're talking about summer sport activities, so typical things like, like in the UK anyway, rounders, which is kind of like baseball really for kids, I would call it. I absolutely loved it. I had my own professional. I had really heavy bat, rather than it was like 3 times the weight of a standard bat. That I'd bought because I was really into rounders. I absolutely loved it when they came up for PE at school because I was really good at it. I was really good at batting. Pretty much every time I connected, it was straight out. And I could run all the way around no problem, like a home run would be. In baseball, pretty much every time I hit the ball, it just absolutely went flying. And I was really good in outfield as well. So I've got a good arm, which obviously translates to the batting really, but a quick arm. So I was very good with outfielding, and I was throwing the ball in and stuff like that. So it was something I really enjoyed. As I said, I got this my own personal bat that I would take to school when I knew we were doing rounders. And I did rounders after school, didn't I? I did an after school club. I was actually gutted in that because obviously I was really, really good. And we went up against some other school, and they were doing almost like baseball throws at us. And obviously that's not how you bowl, how you pitch, let's say, in rounders. It's underarm. And these guys were absolutely throwing it at us, and like, well, hang on a minute, this isn't what we're used to at all. So we would have easily just creamed them, completely easily won if they just played properly. And then when it came to our turn, we had to throw underarm. I was like, well, this isn't fair. So I was really gutted by that. And because I had this heavy bat, it was so difficult to get the timing right. So I was just like struck out at every time. Never ever happened before. But I was just struck out, and I was like, this is rubbish. I was really annoyed about it, as you can tell. But yeah, that was just real life there for a second. So other activities, so all organised by the church. But it was not exclusively for church. So it's like a community event based, I think probably, which our local churches do community events, stuff like that anyway during the year. But anyway, back to the car park. So then what happened after that little church bit there, we then bumped into some people that we apparently loosely knew in some way. So it was kind of like the parents of a kid that one of our kids went to school with or something like that. That was kind of like the impression we got, really. At this point, the rain had completely stopped. So we were able to stand around and have a bit of a brief chat. And yeah, there we go. I think was friends with one of the children. Yeah, so this child was quite a bit younger, by several years younger than my daughter. Yeah, and I had a feeling that I had a feeling that she was actually Muslim. So the family looked Indian as far as kind of race, let's say. Possibly being Muslim, and it was my youngest daughter that was actually running off to chat to the little kid, and apparently, she was chatting about Jesus in some way, and I was kind of like cautious. I was kind of like, this might not go down too well. I might get moaned at here for my child going off and talking about Christianity to a Muslim kid. But it felt safe enough. We were in a safe enough environment. It didn't look like it was going to spark off. So I just kind of let Sophie do her thing. As my youngest daughter that was having a chat. We finally got out of the car park, and as the family sort of moved beyond, I think it's where we crossed the road or something happened just before we crossed the road. But it was something like that. And then we were going to do a left and then walk on to home. The sky now has changed because, as I mentioned, it's been throwing it down with rain. So obviously it would have been very, very overcast. But now, in this short space of time, really, the sky's changed quite a bit, and it's now beautiful blue sky. Absolutely lovely summer day kind of blue sky. And like a real, deep blue, lovely, lovely blue sky. Anyway, and white fluffy clouds. So again, typical more of, I would have said, more sort of summery looking. As I looked at the sky, I noticed something like really unusual. I remember turning to my mum's partner and saying, look at that cloud. What's going on with that cloud? It was really low, really, really, really low. Like, it didn't look like it was all that much higher than. It's probably about twice as high as house height, let's say. So we're probably sub 100 feet for sure. It's really, really low, and it looked really odd because I'm going to read this rather than be going off. But yeah, it looked really, really low on the skyline, it was quite a thin cloud, and it almost sort of looked almost wedge shaped. So it was coming down to a sharp point and then going up to a sort of slightly deeper back, and it looked really, really strange the way it was going across. So because it was obviously low in altitude, um, unlike obviously the really, really high up clouds, you can stare at them, can't you? And sometimes you can't even see that they're moving. Obviously they are. It's just that they're so high up you can't really see them moving. But the lower the cloud is, the more exaggerated you're going to see that speed, aren't you? Because it's much closer to your ground level. So that's basically what happened. Is this was going across wedge shaped. Yeah, it looked like a doorstop I put here. What caught my eye about it though was not so much the shape. It was more and it was more the unnatural speed that it was moving across the sky. Was kind of catching my eye. But as I said, I would expect to go a little bit quicker anyway, just purely because it's lower to the horizon. But they're all really, really slow. All the other clouds around were very slow moving. So there was more distant cloud, and then there was this one cloud that was very, very close and whizzing across. Yeah, so it really stood out, as I said, against the backdrop of the other clouds. This was like the only cloud of its type. The other part that added to the strangeness of this cloud was the cloud looked kind of like superimposed. You know, when you see like special effects on a film or something like that, and you look at it and you're like, well, that's not very convincing. You know, when you see an explosion and there's kind of like that green screen, just kind of a little bit, you know, around the edge, where you can tell it's a foreign sort of object within what you're looking at, and it kind of spoils it, you know. I did notice that. I've noticed that more recently, actually. You know, when it was DVDs and stuff like that, you can't get away with it because how many pixels there were to a screen, let's say, was to a point where it was fuzzy enough, let's say, that stuff like that didn't really notice. But now you get like 4K. If it's not high budget, it just really stands out, doesn't it? And you can look at, you know, like let's say your Blu-ray player upscales an old DVD or something, and you look at it and you're like, I don't remember it looking like that, but it only looks like that because you've got a 4K TV, and it's. I mean, I haven't got a 4K TV. I've got a Blu-ray which sort of upscales it, you know, a bit, but it's not a proper one. But it was a bit like that. So it looked really odd. It looked like almost somebody had put it on like a special effect onto the sky. It just had this outline that looked weird. I don't really quite know how to describe what I mean by that. But yeah, it just looked very strange. And as I said, it caught my eye, and then it looked superimposed. It looked, as I said, it looked very much like a special effect on an old film or a low budget modern film. You know, whether the one where you have there you go. I've even used the same example of an explosion or fire or something like that. And it's clear that it's just not real. You know, because obviously they use a lot of AI, don't they, now to do flames and stuff like that, rather than actually burning a building. They'll put fake flames in. Well, this was like that, but it was even more fake. You know, it was quite obvious. Sort of had an outline around it to match the ground. I'm going to pause it for a second. I'm just going to quickly show you it, just so that it kind of makes sense. And there was basically beyond that one wedge shaped, then there was another one that started coming in, which I'll start describing in a second. But I'm just going to pause it for a moment and then show you the picture. And then I've got a couple of other pictures as well. I'll do it like this anyway. Yeah, I'll pause it for a second. There you go. That's kind of what it looked like. So you can see, you know, it's got a few people there standing there. And then to the left, you've got me and my mum's partner that are standing off away from the rest. Blue sky, you've got the wedge-shaped one on the left. And then you've got this weird-shaped one, which I call duck-shaped, on the right. It looks like a duck lying on its tummy. That's kind of how it looked to me. And distant cloud there as well. And this strange sort of, it was like a fuzzy looking outline around the outside. Right, I'll pause it again. We'll switch it back. And resuming then. Right, okay. So cloud one. So I detailed it as cloud one, cloud two. So the wedge-shaped one. So with that one, I said it looked really, really streamlined. Actually reminded me of the Millennium Falcon. You know, if you were to see that sort of side on, it kind of looked a little bit like that. Yeah, continued to move quickly across the sky. I had this feeling of being spied on as well. It was like something was in that cloud and we were being spied on. They were, yeah, it was like we were being watched. As we were watching them, they were watching us. It's what it kind of felt like. This is because I just had this feeling of it actually being a spaceship veiled in cloud, was kind of what it looked like, which in itself reminds me of things. Oh, there you go, I've written it. Like Independence Day. You know, when you see that film with Independence Day, and there's like this big cloud coming in, and then the UFO comes in through the cloud. That's what it reminded me of quite a lot. Obviously, on much smaller scale. These these clouds that were going by there were obviously nothing like something from that. But yeah, so after my eyes kind of moved off of this wedge-shaped one, I noticed obviously this other one, which I just mentioned, didn't I? Obviously that it was kind of like duck-shaped. Yeah, I described it as a duck on its tummy. So it's, yeah, showing like it looked like a beak bit, then a head, then a body, which will have some meaning in itself, which my little dream book helped me out with. So yeah, so cloud two being the duck one. As with other dreams I've had around camouflage, this is what this felt like. So it felt like the cloud was a camouflage for actually a UFO, is what it felt like. Now I've done a couple of different ones that are sort of around this, but there's one that's called hiding in plain sight UFO delusion. So this will be in season 1, and that's got stuff around that as well. So that's not a cloud camouflage. That's actually it's like a sky camouflage, like stars and planets and things in the sky, and then there's a little glitch, and then it's like, that's a UFO. I've just noticed it. You know, nobody else is aware of it. I was aware of it because I happened to be looking at the right moment in time where its camouflage just glitched a little bit. But again, you know, that's actually a really interesting one. There's stacks of detail to that. It was a really sort of fine detail, and this is very similar. So anyway, so oh, is that what happened? Oh yeah. With this second cloud, it just suddenly broke from its delusion. Do you know what I mean? It was kind of like I've been rumbled, almost like it knew that we noticed, or it just didn't care at this point. So it was going along like that, flat, like I showed you on that picture, the duck one, and then suddenly it kind of did like a barrel roll. It sort of like rolled, and then it just went up. And I was like, well, clouds obviously don't do that, do they? You know, it was just, what was that? You know, yeah, broke its deception. Duck rolled onto its side like a plane suddenly banking. There we go. And then it just went straight up vertically. Of course, no cloud does that. There we go. The illusion was broken, and we all knew that something was going on. You know, that at that point, those of us that saw it, obviously, not everybody's going to see that. People in the restaurant, people in the houses, they're not going to see that. I just happened to be out there watching at the time and saw it happen. And then we started to see more of them. Still veiled in cloud. So again, these were still, but they're all different sorts of shapes. Over this sparse, sort of quite a sparse, what's it called? Sparse sky, really. I mean, it was a blue sky apart from this distant cloud, you know, like high up altitude or far off sort of cloud. But there was nothing close to us at all apart from these ones. So when we saw these things come in, they really stuck out, other than this weird sort of superimposed look to them. Yeah, they really stuck out. So yeah, as I said, the illusion was broken, and this veil of cloud. So there was always this cloud around it. So you never saw an actual UFO. It was always in cloud, but you could tell by the way it was moving that it was not a cloud. Clearly, it was not a cloud. Yeah, there were varying shapes again. So going across the sky, doing all these bizarre maneuvers. You know, again, if you imagine just soaring off and doing all these weird things that clearly a cloud can't do anything remotely close to that. And obviously we had this overall feeling of being spied on. It increased though. It was just this, wow, we're really being watched. And it was like they were doing recon, is basically what it felt like. They were doing some sort of a recon before something big was going to happen. This was just, it's too close. You can't stop us now. You know, this is going to happen. it doesn't matter who you tell at this point because it's just about to happen. Whatever is about to happen is just about to happen. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So they'd all been on this one side of the sky. So if you imagine, as I said, I'm going out of this this big driveway thing that leads up to the restaurant. So we go in that way. Let's say, for sake of this, we go in that way, and everything is in front of me. Now we kind of, I think we got across. Maybe we got across the opposite side of the road now, and then we've turned around, and it's happening actually behind us as well. So this is in the direction of the restaurant, and we noticed other aspects of it. So it was, yeah, I mean, areas which are currently just farmland, because it's kind of where it is in reality, this is on the outskirts of a village. It's kind of like a little gap between two villages, basically. So it's all farmland sort of stuff at the moment. Not for long, though. If that's not how we do things in the UK, we need some houses on there immediately. And they were talking about actually merging the two villages just by building in this green lovely gap. No, let's just build on it. The plans fell apart. This was years ago now, but I was like, you want just some like mega city? I mean, what is going on? It's so frustrating, as you would detect for the multiple times I've mentioned about it. Yeah, so as I said, they're all now. I'm seeing them more behind us, but they're now sort of in front of us because I've turned around and I'm looking in towards the restaurant now. But there was one that was kind of like walnut shaped, which obviously makes you think of the film Flight of the Navigator, which is walnut shaped. So it looked very much like that one. But yeah, we were just stunned by what was going on. But we continued to go home, walking. So I'm going to quickly show you just a picture of, again, just real quick, as to what it looked like. Just to add in another picture, really. Yeah, so I'll just quickly flip it around again. There we go. Another absolutely amazing picture there. But you see the venue. I mean, I just drew it as that. I mean, it's just, it wasn't, I don't really remember too much, but you can see just to the left there, it says driveway. And then to the left of that, it says car park. But you've got the bright blue sky. And you see that walnut shaped one on the left. Other just random shapes. I mean, I decided actually on that far right to do one that looks like the Flight of the Navigator one. When it goes into super speed, it goes a bit more aerodynamic. But the bit I didn't mention just yet is just behind the venue was actually this distant airport. Now that doesn't exist at all, in reality, nothing remotely close. But I started to see stuff going on, and I thought, are they surveilling the distant airport? Now, I didn't know whether that was like a military airport or just a standard commercial airport, but they were sort of, it's like they were looking around and checking things out. There's a little bit there, as you can see on the right, I put their grass path where we spoke to the woman. I'll explain that in a moment as well when we get to that bit, but I'll flip it back now. There you go. I am struggling to get this back in position, so I don't know how that's back in position in comparison to where it was, but where did I get to? Flight of the Navigator. Yeah, I was talking about that. Right, okay. So looking behind this venue, we can actually see this distant airport, which was being surveilled, I would say, a recon kind of thing by these craft in cloud, all moving in different directions. So they're all, as I said, they're going off. So again, if they were clouds, so they'll be going in one direction, wouldn't they? They wouldn't be going one left, one right, one up, So again, no effort whatsoever to actually conceal what they're doing, other than they're in this cloud. But that's it. So yeah, we carried on. Yeah, I put then it starts getting even crazier, as it does. So we carried on walking along this path towards home that has has a bush line. So it has a bush line beyond the farmland. So it's just basically to keep the wind off, I guess. It's just a bit of a windbreak. And knowing at this point these things were clearly UFOs, of some kind, aliens in inverted commas. Again, because we know aliens to be demons. Obviously demons. If you've not heard it already, they come and they brutalize cattle, and they specifically suck out the blood. Demonic, clearly demonic. They take people, abduct them out of their bedrooms. They take them without asking them, and they take children. They take people. They do experiments on them, and it's always at nighttime. Again, it's when you get into a dream state. these things happen. Again, all the demonic attacks always at night time. Well, actually, they're not. Actually, I say that. I have had some stuff that's been during the daytime, but majority of it is nighttime. And they come into your bedroom. Classic. It's classic demonic stuff. Classic stuff. And they do experiments on you, which cause pain and injury. Again, demonic. Clearly demonic. And actually, I haven't bought. Have I bought it? Yeah, I have. I've bought a book about it actually, just because I felt like it would be interesting just to read about people's UFO or slash their alien abductions or their obviously demonic attacks. And it talks about how for people who have actually asked the aliens, let's say, stuff, quite often they'll deny Jesus. They'll be delivering a message that denies Jesus. Why would a being from light years away or another dimension come in to talk about Jesus? Bit weird, bit suspicious. Oh no, we've got new revelation for you. No, it's not Jesus. You've got to ascend to some higher level of understanding, and you're a chosen one. Where's that taken from? Even to the point, actually, where I heard one of them, and the alien inverted commas again, identified itself as being called. Its name was Shamyaza. Okay, that's literally in the Book of Enoch. As the name of one of like the head fallen angels is called Shamyaza. I'm like, what? Does that not ring a few alarm bells? Anyway, well, not to people who know nothing about it, obviously, but people who do, it's surely you'd make up another name, wouldn't you? Rather than somebody who's literally in a book that's talking about fallen angels. Yeah, anyway. So where did I get to? We saw. Okay. Knowing at this point these things are entities, they're clearly, again, aliens. We saw one come down to ground level. This one came down without being veiled in cloud and landed in a sort of grassy area. So this just kind of descended. And this isn't a ship, this is an actual entity, let's say. Come down, wasn't veiled in cloud, landed in a sort of grassy area. It's like a garden-like looking area. It looked like it went into someone's front garden. It wasn't, because I know whereabouts it is. But that's what it kind of looked like. It was like a kind of, well, there's that bushed area that I mentioned that's kind of going across for quite a distance, actually, for this farmland that I mentioned. But this was kind of behind that. And it looked like it was in a kind of a bit more of a kind of, even like a small garden within this area, which doesn't really exist in reality, but it did in the dream. And yeah, I'll go into this. So this thing comes down glowing in light. Okay. This and this thing was like, it was like a 2D cartoon character, which is so random. 2D. This is reality, but this thing is 2D coming down, which is so. If we're being technical, yes, it would be 3D because it's going to have some dimension to it, but it didn't really look like it. So it was like super thin, if you see what I mean. But again, I'll explain that in a moment. So it had a very Disney-like kind of look to it. So some sort of like that kind of styling to it. It reminded me a lot of, if you've seen anything to do with like Disney and how they used to do old animation for, let's say, I'm trying to think of some of the older ones like Snow White, and all of those kind of ones from those kind of era. What they would do is they would have like an acetate, which is what you'd write on. Well, you can write on and put on a projector, can't you? So that somebody sees it on screen. So we used to have those at school. But those same acetates, what they would do is they'd paint on the character and stuff like that. And then you'd add one onto another for all these different bits, for all the different characters sort of coming in. And then you could pull one out. And they would do it all very, very slowly. Very, very slow process. But that's what this thing looked like. It literally looked like it had been drawn onto an acetate because it had a light within it. So if you imagine you've got, I'm trying to think of better ways to describe it. It's a very tough thing to describe, to be honest. It's like it had an inner light that lit all the way through it. rather than it radiating out too much, if that kind of makes sense. It wasn't like a blinding light. It was more that it was glowing, I suppose, is better to describe, glowing as it came down. But yeah, I'll go on to describe it, and I'll show you a little bit of a picture I drew of it, which is really weird. But yeah, as I said, it looks like artists, how they drew slides, when they were creating, say, like 1930s, 1940s, 50s, maybe, all that sort of stuff, when they were doing all these kind of like Disney films, that sort of stuff. As I said, yeah, imagine a Snow White looking character is what came down. So the outside was it had like a thick pen outside to it, let's say, and then finer detail was done with like a fine liner. Again, you will see this in my Demonic Realm series as that being described several times. But that's come up. Okay. This is all. Oh, there you go. This is also the same as I've described in many other dreams. Example, there we go, cartoon clone. If you look up cartoon clone, you look up alien invasion. So these are the titles you'll find in season 1. These describe similar sort of stuff that happened. Anyway, I've not described this being yet. So obviously, so it was slightly taller than human size. So difficult to say. I mean, only slightly taller. I put maybe sort of like 6.5, 7 foot more. So so not dramatically bigger, but bigger. Certainly bigger than your average person, I would say. That's what I would estimate. About 7 foot, let's say, or close to 7 foot. But the character was actually a little girl. So it's a little girl wearing a dress, and she had her hair in like a Princess Leia kind of buns, on the top. And she had a yellow dress on, and I believe that she had ginger hair with like a bit of a fringe, as I said, this kind of thing. Yellow dress, puffy sort of like princess shoulder sort of things, which again has come up before in Airport Lounge, which is in my Demonic Realm series, but I did do that one separately. But there's a part there where it represents the divine, though, rather than the demonic, which is what this is, but incredibly similar. So check that one out as well. Obviously, I'm going to keep dropping in other videos because there's so many things that I've actually seen over and over and over again in different ways. Loads of similarities. Yeah, it's really strange. Obviously, I'm never going to bed thinking of these things. Do you know what I mean? It's just, this is just how they are. This is what I've said actually before, is I've said stuff like the demonic realm, it always seems to be like a blue color. And then that's just how it is. It's not like I'm thinking, oh, well, I imagine this will be blue. It is blue. It's just blue, But again, Demonic Realm series, if you've not seen that, I love that series. I know it's my own videos, but it does take you on a real trip through all sorts of different types of experiences. It's been really, really, really wide, the type of experiences I've had. So definitely check out that series. It's a playlist. It's good. It's ready to go. Plays in order. Quite a few videos. Takes you in all sorts of different directions. But yeah. Anyway, so puffy outfit, and she's carrying around a basket. So it kind of had like almost like a Red Riding Hood vibe to it. Not that she was wearing a hood or anything like that, but an innocent looking girl sort of thing with a basket, and she was picking flowers in this garden. All right, and putting them into her basket. I was let's see if she was picking flowers, very Snow White kind of style, I guess 1930s, as in how she was dressing and things like that. Just had that real look to it. As I mentioned, it came down glowing with a light that was emanating from inside, and would describe the look in the following way. So if you've ever had these kind of lamps, so I use an example of something we had. So we had just like a plain face kind of lamp with a little base. You put batteries in, has a light, and it lights up through this base. That's probably only about that thin, but it will have like a picture of a dolphin on it, or a picture, whatever you like, and it shines that whole glass pane up, or plastic pane, again, depending on what one you got. It was like that. It was like it was lit from somewhere, but that light was coming all the way through. You couldn't see a point of light, if you see what I'm trying to describe here. It was just the whole thing, but it just all glowed, really stood out. Yeah, like an LED bulb at the bottom of this thing. Anyway, yeah, so I put, it looked similar to that because, as I said, this thing was 2D. It wasn't 3D. Again, as I said, I've explained what I mean by that. I mean that it was to its absolute smallest width. You couldn't see any width to it, really. Completely unlike anything, obviously, in reality. So I was just watching all of this through this bush, so I could see it kind of behind this bush, but it didn't seem like it was too aware of me. It was like I was observing it. I mean, I was a person in the dream, of course, but I mean, I'm observing it, and it, like you would observe apes in the jungle, I guess, that kind of thing. I wasn't aware. I was just peering through and having a little look. Yeah. So beyond fields, bushes, etc., etc. I was observing her. Yeah, there you go. But she was unaware that I was watching. Potentially, as far as I know, she was unaware. She didn't say she. It wasn't showing me any reasons to think that it realised I was there. Okay, I'm going to pause again. I'm going to give you a weird picture of it. I did do 2 pictures actually, but they don't. I mean, they look more or less the same anyway. I think the first picture I did was actually slightly better, so I'll show you both. Right, I'll pause that. Okay, so this is the one I literally drew directly after it happened, like straight away. I'm downstairs, I'm grabbing a piece of paper and I'm drawing it. Okay, so I did do obviously the other bit. Where is it? It was to do with the car park. Us standing there watching this and the venue, and then all these different bits. You see, so I've just basically copied it, just made it a little bit neater. But the one here, as I said, you can see some flowers, some bushes in front, and this thing veiled behind it. 2D, lit up from non-natural source. Sorry, I couldn't even read my own writing. A dark outline around it and fine detail within. Yeah, and she was just exploring that area. And we've got a few little bits there where my daughter's grabbed hold of it and decided to draw on it. The other one, this is the one I drew into the book, of course. So I'm seeing through bushes. So all of that you can see there is through bushes, but it's difficult to draw a bush and then seeing through a bush. But she's, very basic features. But it had dark eyes. It literally didn't have eyes as such. So it is like you see it there. It didn't have any. There was no pupils or all of that kind of stuff. It just looked like that. Thick outside detail, fine detail within, as I mentioned, glowing, giving off a glow, and that's more or less it. I'll spin that around again. Okay, recording. So then it got even weirder again. I found out that this was not localized actually to our area alone, but it was actually in many areas all at the same time. So it's like a coordinated thing that happened. So this is what I'm saying. There was this bit with these clouds zooming around everywhere, and it was like, we don't really care if you see us at this point because we're just about to do something. And that's what happened. This being came down. And this wasn't just located, as I said, in our area, but it was in many areas at the same time. So again, a bit like Independence Day, they all come into the atmosphere at the same time over all the various different ones. It's classic sneak attack sort of stuff, isn't it, really, when you think about it? As we were walking home, we were still walking home. I was watching something on my phone. It was like news footage that was coming in. It's like breaking news, blah blah blah, that sort of thing. And it was on some sort of like social media or some kind of a news it was coming up with. It was professional in the way that it was filmed. So it was like a news reporter, like holding a microphone, that kind of thing. But yeah, it may have been on social media. Not that it matters, but there was a video of one of these other things that was interacting with a cameraman, as this was all being picked up on cameras, and people were obviously filming out what was going on. So this was worldwide. There was videos going out everywhere. It was like, this is going on everywhere. I just remember that the venue that we had just come from, that it's currently a restaurant, but this was actually being used as a wedding venue. So then other parts to this kind of came back. I said maybe it was the church, maybe it was like a religious setting or something like that. Well, it looks like there's a wedding of some sort that was going on at that previous venue that I was at, because I remember seeing my dad and his partner and my brother and his partner, and my other brother, and I remember them they actually had a camera, and then because they were taking masses of single images. When you hold your finger on it, just goes stacks and stacks of images. They were doing that. And then there was and there was some other thing that had actually come to our venue. So even though we turned our back on it, we were walking down the road. Now we saw this other thing further down, back at the venue. Something had happened. Now they were all, I put that they were, as in my relatives, let's say, they were all sort of smartly dressed, and they were actually leaving sort of behind us after having a meal at the wedding venue. When it was raining, I'd walked to a side entrance and I'd seen a big dining area, which where people were eating together, which, is not at all like what the setup is right now. After eating, we left. So it's just kind of me recounting some of the bits I remember afterwards, actually. So well, we were eating at this venue, and we'd been at this wedding thing for hours, and it was one of those where we just like, we're local, like really local. We're just gonna go now. We've kind of we're a bit exhausted from all the stuff that's been going on. Anyway, I'll describe a bit of what this other footage was looking like that I was seeing. So I saw a playback of a very mainstream media professional sort of newsreader interviewing people, chatting with people at this venue, and it looked very Christmassy, which again doesn't make any sense, does it? Because I've just said it was a lovely blue sky, etc., etc. Lovely day, yeah, Christmassy looking. So I'm not sure what I mean by that. I imagine I mean there's decorations everywhere or something like that. Which again, if there's a wedding going on, maybe I'm just picking up on that. Okay, it's very odd. This very odd looking creature came up to this newsreader, came up to them, which is, I would have said, the closest you could ever get to what this thing was is it looked like a groundhog. So groundhog slash sort of beaver looking thing. Is what it looked like in size and actually how it looked. So it wasn't massive, but in comparison to a human, let's say, so it's quite a lot smaller than a human, but not tiny either. Again, very cartoon looking. So it was almost like watching Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where you've got the intersect there between reality and cartoon characters playing out on the screen at the same time. It was like that. So this cartoon-like character was there at the same time as normal human people, which were interacting, and they're interacting with this cartoon-looking thing as well. But this one was actually 3D, so rather than the other one being almost like a pane of glass, in the way that it was, yes, very thin, this was actually very 3D. So it was wearing like weird. So imagine a groundhog, obviously, and it's wearing a bobble hat, a scarf, and the colours are like red and green. And that's why I mentioned it had this kind of, I think it's the colours that made me think very Christmassy. Red and green, golds are kind of quite Christmassy colours, aren't they? Yeah. And a newsreader was talking to actually a couple of people, so humans. Typical sort of microphone, handing the microphone, sort of holding it out while they're talking to them, doing an interview of some sort. And this smallish thing just jumped in wanting attention. So if you imagine you've got on screen, you've got one person talking, another person, in front of the screen, and then sort of in between their legs or just slightly in view, it just kind of, sort of like pushed its way in, wanted to be center of attention. It's really weird. It was again a bit oversized, being roughly the same size as a small child. Oh, actually, okay, so slightly bigger than a very small child. I would suggest from memory. But it barged in between these two people that were talking on video and started talking directly to the camera. And it was really full of energy. It was enthusiastic, and whatever it was saying, which was in English, um, well, I don't recall what it was said, but imagine the energy and attitude of Alvin the Chipmunk. Yeah, so it was a bit like that. It was jumping all over the place. It was massively energetic. It was saying stuff. You couldn't shut it up. It was very much like that, wanting all the attention. As mentioned, I was watching this all on playback on my phone, on this news feed, I guess, on the way back home. I hadn't actually travelled really that far from the car park. Was now on the other side of the venue. Obviously, as I mentioned, I'm walking down opposite side, and I've looked back, haven't I? And I saw that stuff that was going on behind. I'm now walking along. I've seen this character in this bush bit, which is a bit further down that road that's connected to our village. And this is where, yeah, so it was actually on the edge, just as we were leaving the venue. There's a little bit of a grass path that kind of comes down. It comes out right onto the road, actually, in reality. A little bit dangerous, but there was this woman who had been leaving the venue as well. We'd gone a different route, so that's kind of like a dangerous route to come out, really, because you're literally straight onto a road. There's no pavement, nothing like that. You're straight onto road, and there's actually a swinging corner. And it used to be at the time national speed limit, so you could do about 60 mile an hour around this country road, and it comes around a corner, and then you're right on top of this. So you've got, and actually the view around the side of this venue, it's almost on, if you imagine it's kind of on a U shape where the venue is. So people come around here really quick. Not that you could quite do 60 mile an hour, but you'd be coming around at about 40-ish, let's say, coming around, but then you're blindsided. You wouldn't see, because you just see the side of the building, and then somebody just poke their head out or just walk straight into the road. So you have to be so aware as a pedestrian when you're walking out of there. Again, reality. I'm talking about reality. And this was set up very, very similar to reality. And so this person, as I said, she is just about to walk out. She's kind of slowly walking down this kind of little hill bit that is taking, because it's slightly raised, you see this venue from road level, only a little bit. But she's going down. I mean, as a rate, it's probably about 4 foot high. You know, it's not much at all. And it can be quite muddy, so it can be a bit slippery as well. So not good. I think there might be some steps there, but I suppose they don't want to encourage people using that. But it's one of those routes that's been carved out just purely because people keep using it, you know, as a shortcut. Because it is a shortcut, you see, from where this restaurant is. You could just do a left, walk in a straight line, and then you're straight out. Or you do, rather than doing a left, you do a right, and you walk through the car park, and you're walking all the way off, and then you cross the road over there, and then you've got to walk all the way back on yourself. So it does take quite a bit longer, which is why I'm only catching up with this woman after quite a lot of stuff's happened, because I'm catching up on where she now is. So again, she's walking across, and as she's walking across, and I'm bumping into this woman. So she's in her 60s, I would say. She's also leaving the venue on her own. And I said to you, have you seen all this crazy stuff that's going on? Mental stuff that's going on at the moment. And she said, oh, I haven't really seen anything. You know, I was saying, it's literally still going on right now. I'm seeing like videos of things, you know, all this sort of stuff, of what's going on. And yeah. So I was saying, yeah, it's still going on, it looks like. And I said, I'm not sure whether the consensus was that these were aliens or something else. I said, but I explained how these were clearly, I said angels, because that's how they came down. Okay, they looked like angels. She said, they don't look like they don't look like angels. And I thought, well, you haven't really seen anything, or have you seen something? You know, but she didn't seem to be phased. She wasn't phased. She wasn't fussed. You know, I was explaining to her how angels can, you know, shapeshift, and so can look like whatever they like, you know. And she felt it was all way too far fetched. You know, when you speak to people about God related stuff, and they're just like, what? It doesn't compute with a lot of people. Again, a lot of the demonic stuff. I imagine if I spoke to a lot of people about my demonic things, you know, I speak to Christians about it, they get it. You know, if I speak to other people, they don't get it at all. It's because it just seems way too far fetched. This was very similar. So obviously she wasn't a Christian. You know, she wasn't somebody who reads and understands what all this sort of stuff is about. So yeah, she felt it was all way too far fetched and was looking at me like I was completely nuts. You know, raised eyebrows, that kind of stuff. My mum actually jumped in and she sort of said, saying how I'd had many experiences with demons prior to all of this happening, and that we tried to tell people, and she was sort of saying, without saying the words, it was kind of like, there, dear, you know, are you okay? Sort of thing. Like I was mental, literally mental, lock up, mental. You know, it was like it wasn't, she thought I was crazy, obviously, but kind of like, oh, do you need looking after? Do you need me to get somebody? It was that kind of thing, you know? And yeah, so she was expecting concerns for my health, my mental health, clearly. But more like I was, mentally ill. I probably needed to sit down and maybe talk to somebody about, talk to a professional about this, you know. Very much makes me think of the film, as I said, Independence Day, where you've got, yeah, what was he, Russell? His name called Russell? I think it is, isn't it? Where you've got the character called Russell, who's in the film Independence Day, where this guy's been, abducted by aliens in the past, and he's been ridiculed by his community. They're all laughing about him, all the time, where he actually gets proved as being right. It's like, I've been telling you this has been happening. And that's more or less the sort of thing that he says. Yeah, he's a funny character. I also and he's talking about they did experiments on me, they did this, they did that, and obviously he's telling the truth to his knowledge as to how he experienced it. I'd also briefly been speaking with this woman actually about Jesus as well, and that he was coming soon, and this was all part of the build-up of his return. And of course, my daughter was obviously talking with this young little girl right earlier in that car park area, was talking about Jesus as well at the same time. And obviously it was a major world event, and felt like life will never be the same after this event happens. It was the point that we had been building up to for decades and decades of all these alien sightings, which I think is what it is. It's, what do you do? Before you're actually going to implement something, you warm people up to it, don't you? So let's say it's something different. Let's say, I don't know, let's use my work as an example. So it will be something like, I don't know. I'll use this example. How about we try working Saturdays, guys? Because, all the other guys seem to be doing really, really well with working Saturdays. How about we trial it? Let's just trial it, see how it goes. What you're telling me is, this is the soft way of telling me, I'm working Saturdays now, am I? That's what this is like. So aliens, all these little drops of, you're all nuts, for in like the 50s, let's say, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, is everyone's absolutely nuts. Of course, you're all just lunatics, to the government's releasing loads of data on it. Seems like this is actually happening. This is actually real. Is because of they're trying to change it into a new gear now, which is, now we're ready for you to accept it. Okay, you've had a lot of time to accept that this may be the case. It is the case. That's just programming, and it happens all the time, as to all this kind of stuff. Again, I've mentioned it many, many times before. Certain things are happening around 2000, around some pandemic. It was all programming, obvious to a lot of people, I would imagine. That was my awakening, really, where I just thought, this is so incredibly obvious that there's something bigger happening here, that you're being primed for something that's going to happen. This is just the soft launch, isn't it? It's like you're opening a shop, you do a little quiet one, and then here's the big unveiling. That's the kind of thing, that we're talking about. So that kind of thing that happened in 2000 was laying framework of locking up in, I won't go into it. I'm not going to go into it. Compliance is all about compliance. Ultimately, obedience, which is what God's looking for us, is obedience. But they're looking at it from a different point of view. Obedience to the complete opposite of God. Anyway, moving on past. Yeah, obviously, major event. Obviously, a major event. Been going on for decades, etc., etc. However, the way in which this was done was really odd, in a sort of disarming way of cartoon characters. It was a bit like you see in films, isn't it? Like, use the film Contact. So the film Contact is where we humans, we're given all this technology, we go visit an alien, on another planet, and the alien appears as the main character's dad, and she sort of thinks she thinks it's her dad initially, but they realise it's just the alien that's taking on the form of dad, and I think the guy says something like, or the alien, let's say, it's because if we showed you what we really look like, it would be too scary for you. So we appeared as something that we felt would be kind of like disarming, really, something that you would be okay with, which is a dad who's died. So that's what this feels like, cartoon characters. Disarming. You don't look at a little girl with puffy, stuff and necessarily scared. But if it came down with massive fangs and wings, immediately you're, whoa, this is demonic, that sort of thing. So, yeah. I wrote down here. It's like Ghost. It reminded me of like Ghostbusters as well, where they choose the form of their destroyer, and it ends up being the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, doesn't it? It's like that's like that was the because they were trying to think of the least scariest thing possible, the Marshmallow Man. There we go. So it's that same sort of thing that's happening. This was kind of similar in the way it was a. They're all secretly studying us. They had done for years. They decided to present themselves in the form of a cartoon of these cartoon characters. And even with the groundhog thing, again, it was like having a chipmunk sort of thing, again, not scary. As previously mentioned, these clouds were, covering them so that they could do their reconnaissance. And then obviously they were, disturbingly, they were hanging around in the air above the air base. So again, I think it's probably military, personally, this air base. And let's chat this through, shall we? So I know that's a very long dream. As you can see, there's a lot of detail to that. So my thoughts were, and I've been doing that as we've been going. I've been doing that clearly, as mentioned above. I actually think that oh yeah. So I wrote a bit of transparency. So I think the night before we'd watched the film Into the Storm, which is all about tornadoes. So obviously there's clouds in that and stuff, but and there's a bit where yeah. There's a bit where the strong winds actually pick up planes at an airport. So I'm thinking there was an airport in my dream. Am I thinking of it from there? Potentially. Maybe. But I don't think so. Again, you have things that come up in dreams, and I also think that sometimes you watch films or watch stuff because God wants that to be fresh in your mind, almost. I've had that various times where there's no way that this dream was just about the fact that I'd seen a zombie film or something like that. But it did happen in the day. Doesn't mean it's not from God at all. So anyway, thoughts. Yeah, so I don't think actually that film really had much to do with it. Obviously, clouds, yes, tornadoes, airport, yes, but angels, 2D things, groundhogs, wedding venues, none of that stacks up at all. So the clouds moving super quick, so superimposed, blah, 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 blah. I'm just going to see if there's anything here. The overall feeling, I've been inferring it all the way through, is deception. It's all about deception. Clearly, this is deception. Thick outlines, thin detail. This is like the demonic characters that I've had in many dreams, UFOs and actual spirit beings, let's say. So I associate this all with the angelic / demonic realm. Again, angelic, demonic, they're kind of the same thing in a way, in that if you think of they were all angels and they were all in heaven, and then a certain proportion, 1/3, decided they were going to rebel against God. And they are the way they are because they were rebels. But they're still angelic beings, even the demons. But we just call them demons to differentiate between those that work for God. Hope that makes sense. But they are one in the same being as such. So they're just a little bit different. Groundhog. Oh, there you go. I've given a measurement. It was about 75 centimeters tall, roughly. Pretty much the size of a large cuddly toy. Yeah, so I wanted to go through some things actually. So I had, I got, as I mentioned, I got a dream book. So I just wanted to mention a couple of things. Okay, so a beaver. So groundhog, I couldn't find that in my dream dictionary. I keep referring it to it as beaver was in there. I thought it was pretty close to a beaver as to what it looked like. Apparently, according to this dream dictionary, a beaver means busy, diligent, or hardworking, or banking up. Saving the word or spirit. So yeah, building. I think that's because of the banking up is imagery of obviously what beavers do, which is they get logs, don't they, and dam up rivers and stuff like that. I mean, I don't think there's really anything really to glean from that, to be honest. I looked up duck because of that duck cloud, and this is purely because I had revelation on what a duck means, and it does fit in with another dream, which I'm going to call duckerfly. Duckerfly, I think is what I'll call it. Very, very strange, but the symbology in that is so crazy. It's like something you would see in some weird vision that the prophets have. I'm not a prophet, obviously. What I mean is it was so symbolic. It's one of those you just look at it and think, I haven't got a clue what that is at all, apart from maybe knowing a little bit. But then I managed to, it did unravel over time. But that's going to be quite a difficult one to explain. Duck, what that means is really unclean spirit. Now, I've got the book here, and it does actually say duck is an unclean spirit, a fleshly spirit being. If it's in flight, then it's means migrating. Obviously, if it's in a formation, it means unity. If it's out of water, it means that it's vulnerable. If it's like water off a duck's back, that says a saying, so it's kind of like resisting the spirit. Or number 7, it says an easy target. But the one I've always thought of it is unclean spirit. And now, obviously, that's exactly what I've just mentioned, is that these were UFOs. UFOs being demons, demons being unclean spirits. So yeah, that stacks up absolutely with that duck. I don't think you get anything for wedge, but yeah, that's what the other one was. But it was all clearly deception, wasn't it? Obviously. The I'm just scanning through here because I don't want to go over stuff I've already gone through. Venue, blah blah blah. Interpretation, right? Okay. Well, a theatre stream is about growing deceptions. There you go. And that are planning to it's going to happen, and maybe because yeah, okay, all right. So it's basically saying that groundwork's been laid, for this deception that's happening. I mean, I would imagine a lot of the groundwork has already been set for a lot of the kind of deceptions. Maybe we'll see in the end times. Obviously, there's going to be more stage setting to come, but yeah, yeah, yeah. So while I was writing the dream into this diary, I randomly had a song just from nowhere, just boom, just started playing in my mind. Now I've had that as a means of communication quite a few times actually from the Holy Spirit. I've had it quite a few times, coming out of dreams, and then you have, as you're coming out of the dream, music's playing, almost like Inception, where it does it to wake them up. The film Inception. But yeah, I've had dreams, and I have a lasting impression from them. I've talked about one where I had like a George Michael track, and I was convinced it was gonna happen. It was like I have faith that I'm going to hear this track today. I hadn't heard it for about 3 weeks. It's not a popular track. It comes on TV the same day. There was other stuff that sort of came out of that, but there was that. There's other ones I've had where I've had another track playing, and then I looked at the music video, and then the music video is what I just dreamt about, was solar activity and stuff. That came up. I'm trying to think of other ones. There was other ones where I was listening to, I had music that was playing in the dream, and it was me knowing that music was from God, and then I realized what that was talking about. So this is not unusual for me, anyway. What happened was, this particular song was by the band called Haim, Haim, and it's called If I Could Change Your Mind. And I think it's all about a breakup with a boyfriend or something like that. But Haim basically means life in Hebrew. So it's a Hebrew word, Haim. And it means life. So when you would say, like we would say cheers or something like that, and you clink glasses, you say l'chaim, which means it's like to life, like cheers to life, that kind of thing. And as it happens, I was introduced to that song at a wedding venue as well. So that's like a little bit of a connection as well. And my brother was the one who played that at their wedding, and they were two characters that were in this dream. That's the only, like, the amount of dreams with my brother in, very, very rare. With his partner, that's the first one. And actually my dad and his partner, again, very, very rare. I don't think I've had a couple of dreams with my dad in, but very, very rare, maybe 2 or 3, none with his partner in. So again, very, very rare. So that pointed me to that as well. So it just seemed interesting that dream came up. But the title being If I Could Change Your Mind was almost felt like, to me, like a message from God, saying, all these kind of things, all these deceptions, all this kind of stuff that God's going to allow to happen, because it's all part of bringing as many people as possible to faith in Jesus. Because when the tribulation happens, the last 7 years of the prophet of Daniel's prophecy, when that happens, there's going to be, like fire. What would we say? the plagues of Egypt. A lot of them are the plagues of Egypt. So locusts, but I think the locusts personally are demonic spirits, the representation anyway. You've got obviously blood, water turning to blood. You've got these asteroid meteors that smash into the earth. You've got 100-pound in weight rocks that come down like hailstones, which represent stoning, people being stoned because they're blaspheming against God. You know, they're shouting up and screaming to the sky against God because all these judgments coming. You know, there's all this stuff. You know, the sun being blotted out, so it's just dark all the time, everywhere. You know, again, goes back to the plagues of Egypt, where Goshen, where all the people of Israel were living, which is sort of a lovely place in Egypt. Obviously, the area where the Pharaoh was all in pitch black darkness again, and that happened as well with when Jesus died on the cross. Then and again, that's an event that's actually confirmed outside of the Bible. That's happened. I was watching something recently. It was recorded in China. But yeah, interesting stuff. Really, really interesting stuff. But yeah, that song. So it's to life, and it's yeah, basically meaning life. And if I could change your mind, meaning, well, kind of like, you know, it's God trying to change our mind so that we have life. You know, really. That's what it felt like. I felt like it's of any kind of song I could think of, that was probably the most fitting song. And the deception is extreme. Now, the deception that will happen in the end times will be extreme. I do think aliens, as such, will probably quite likely play a part, just because of it's so big in pop culture, and this slow unveiling. It feels like it's going to happen because it describes it, because it then explains things like the rapture. So the rapture is, and people say, oh, it's not in the Bible, the rapture. Well, no, I can't remember the Latin. It's similar to rapturo, but it means like snatching up. So it's like it's a bit like, you know, you come back home from work and then your daughter or your son sees you and they come running towards you and you just grab them and lift them up. That's what it's all called in the Greek. It's called harpazo. Okay, but it's the same thing. Means the same thing, but it's where it says about how Jesus says how he will meet us in the sky. So the dead in Christ will meet us in the sky, and we'll go up. Those of us who are alive, we'll go up and meet him in the sky, and then we'll go back to heaven. Okay, and then Jesus properly comes back when his feet are actually then planted on the Mount of Olives. Is what is the common, I would have said the most common thing that people feel, but there is also stuff before where it sounds like, and a lot of people think that he's going to go to maybe Petra or that sort of area, which the people of Israel are hiding from the Antichrist. And they've got sort of sanctuary for was it 3.5 years? Yeah, 3.5 years in this area of possibly Petra, maybe not, but it sounds like it is. And that Jesus will come and basically, you know, rescue them. Okay, so and that's before he comes back, and it talks about, because he talks about his garments will be drenched in blood, and that's because of something's already happened. So, and I think it's to do with that. And again, not me. I'm learning from other people. This is not me. So that's what I think it's talking about. Yeah, I'm going to read out. Yeah. Again, talking about that song, that it's about Jesus trying to change our mind. You know, if I could change your mind. Again, back to that song. Sorry. And yeah. So I'm going to just read a brief bit here of scripture. So this is Matthew 24:24, where Jesus warns, obviously, of deceptions. So it says, for false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. So when it talks about even the elect, it means Christians, true believers. So it's saying that they'll be so strong, there'll be so much deception that even if it was possible, meaning that it's not possible, then even you know, Christians could be fooled, but they won't be. And that's why, and that's me seeing those clouds, isn't it? And seeing them superimposed and thinking, no, there's something not right there. That's me not being fooled by the deception. Okay, the Christian, the born again believer, not being fooled. Okay, and I think a lot of the deceptions will come through AI and stuff like that. I mean, I've kind of thought this about You know, all it would take was somebody with really, really convincing AI that gets, I don't know, like a speech from a politician, you know, that goes viral, and the impact is felt before they can realize that it's faked. And you know, a nation goes and fires off a load of nukes or attacks or does something as a reaction to something that's completely fake. I think that sort of stuff could happen. It could happen. What else have we got? What else have we got? I'm going to leave it there. I put on here, read out a sinner's prayer. What I would suggest actually instead is, I just did a sinner's prayer on the last video. So just look up any of my videos that say in brackets, it will say, well, what's in brackets? And I do in speech marks, sinner's prayer. Just have a little look. It's normally right at the end. So if you're just looking for a sinner's prayer, this is what you would say to invite God into your life. God does not just force his way into your life and start doing stuff without your permission. Ultimately, we were created for free will. And obviously the angels have free will as well, which is why some of them rebelled and some of them stayed. Which it almost in a way does sometimes make me think of the people of Israel when they're wandering in the wilderness. They've literally got God with them in a pillar of cloud and fire and stuff like that at night. And yet, while Moses is up there on the mountain, you know, receiving the 10 Commandments, and there's fire and lightning and stuff above, they're down there and they start wanting to pray to other gods, and they want to make the golden calf and then start celebrating. And you're like, it doesn't matter. For some people, it doesn't matter what you show them, they'll still rebel. And it does remind me of that, because obviously you've got loads of people there that start, yay, you know, let's go and party and stuff like that and all this stuff. And it's like, but you're walking around and you've got God who's following you. You know, you've got Moses that strikes a rock and water's pouring out of there. You know, you've got these unbelievable miracles around you all the time, yet you're rebelling against them, rebelling against God. It's so strange to me, but it happens. People sometimes cannot see the most obvious truth that's in front of them. Okay, a good example of that would be reading Isaiah 53. So I read that on the last one. Read Isaiah 53, and even as a non-Christian, people know who that is. Honestly, I've done that to people. I've sent this to, and somebody said, "What do you think that's talking about?" Bearing in mind, obviously, yes, it's a Bible verse. You know, but what do you think that is talking about? And people say, "Well, it's obviously Jesus, isn't it?" Well, yeah, it is obvious. It is obvious, but many people deny it. They say, no. I mean, it's talking about the nation of Israel. It's talking about a man. It literally says a man. So where are you getting that from? Anyway, I'll leave that there. It's a very, very long one. Obviously, this is very on the longest side of my videos. So thank you if you've stuck with it all the way through. Hopefully you found that interesting all the way through, because there is some really interesting stuff in there. Some crazy visuals. Crazy visuals. But yeah. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Obviously, look up some of these other videos that I have mentioned. So obviously, I've mentioned several during the video: alien invasion, cartoon clone. There were some others, wasn't there? But oh yeah, hiding in plain sight, a UFO delusion. Yeah, just check them out. Check them out. Some really interesting stuff in there. The dreams have been quite interesting. Certainly in season 1. Season 2 is over a much shorter space of time. So this is only over 5 months, whereas the previous one was like 2.5 years. So obviously it's going to be a bit more material, obviously, on the previous season. But again, there's been some really interesting stuff. Yeah. Okay. I'll see you on the next one.